Why is recorded in front of a live studio audience.
Although my own mother, by the way,
Oh,
um,
please.
although she's probably single-handedly responsible for a recent drop in numbers because she stopped listening because she likes to stockpile them for when she has, like, drives to do, and she's coming to stay for 3 weeks. So,
Wait, what?
yeah, I'll tell you what.
What?
Okay.
When?
In
When?
in t
When?
in 2 weeks.
I am blocking off
I know.
those times. I'm just gonna tell the children daddy's busy.
For the
What?
whole 3 weeks.
Can we please talk to
Yeah,
her?
you can talk to her if you want to. Oh
Please.
god.
Oh,
It's
please. This
gonna
is
be
gonna be
so
so great.
brutal. But this is
Oh,
but this is
what do you
what
wait, we've been discussing for how long now this idea of people who we talk to on the show,
Mhm.
we are respectful and we are respectful to their
But is
belief and
but
choices,
are our
and
guests
then but
respectful
with
of us?
for the most part, right?
Usually. Yeah, but my mother's not going
Yeah.
to be.
This is Why, with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling.
This show has, if nothing else, brought my mother and I to a point where we can talk. We're dancing on the edge of the volcano on so many of these
Yeah.
conversations,
No, my
and
mother
then
and
we
I
just turn and run down the hill.
yeah,
And I think too, because you said it was so terrible, before we aired it, the one where I told the story about, saying how hot their house is and
yes,
telling them it's because their body's shutting down.
yes.
I hipped her to that just to be like, "Hey, let's just flag this one right here."
Yeah,
And I did have to remark and remind her, like, "I did say this to your face. This is
right,
nothing like."
right.
Um, and all I got after that was a text that was like, "Oh, I listened to the show, very funny. Everyone's a comedian."
That's hilarious.
But this is so my mom's big thing now, not now, it's been for a few years. When she's traveling, when she lands somewhere, she texts my siblings, myself, and then it seems like every person she's ever met in the city of Brookline. So, like, she's going to Florida for vacation, she'll text everyone, say, "Hey, just landed, everything's fine." So, at first, I was like, "Oh, great, she's just updating me on she's perfect, great, don't have to call." And then all of a sudden, my phone starts practically smoking with the amount of texts coming in from phone numbers that are not in my contacts,
Right.
just in the 6-1 area code. "Have a great time." And so, in my effort to get off of these lists and get a more personal text, I have started responding all.
Oh my god.
So, as you know, my mother, well, both parents are into ballroom dance, and my
Yes.
mom, competes. Um, and so when she does compete, it's with her instructor and not my dad.
Yes.
And him, same thing. Different instructor, I should
Mhm.
note.
Yes.
And so when she does these things, it's always like it's at a casino in, the middle of nowhere in Connecticut or whatever. And so she texts this group of people photos of everybody all spangled up or of her
Yes.
solo dance. And she sends one of these, and I'm just getting and I think I'm driving too, where I'm just like, I can't concentrate. It's interrupting whatever I'm listening to just ding and say,
Yes.
"Another text from someone in 617 you don't know." So I get home and I write back, "You look happy, but I'm still not going to call him dad." And then my sister got in being like, "Stop it right now. This is not appropriate for everyone to hear." And I wrote back, "Please, our father is still alive." And much like the time too, I sent her a picture of our son wearing my glasses and tried to convince her I had shrunk and kept it going for about 45 minutes, where
That's
she'd be saying like,
hilarious.
stop it, knock it off. And I'm like, no, I am jumping from letter to letter right now, trying to type this out to you. Please send help. I am very, very small. What does it say on your business card? I have no idea what's the short one sentence way to explain what you do.
It depends which business card. I actually carry multiple ones.
Of course you do.
So when I'm full-time with a company, I have typically a CTO or COO title. I have my personal cards for my consulting, in which my title is White Knight, part of my White Knight consulting business, which includes the taglines, Dragon Slayed, Damsel Saved, Evil Vanquished. And
Okay.
then I have the
Okay.
author cards, which is author of the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You.
Ballroom dancer, I noticed, is not on there.
I don't get a lot of call for ballroom dancing on my business cards.
Well, here we are.
Now you're.
It's always the card you don't carry that you need to have.
True.
I was a competitive ballroom dancer throughout most of my 20s, and I did teach for a while as well.
All right. So let's start towards the beginning with the ballroom dancing, because that was a little bit ago.
Ballroom dancing is a lot of people don't know this, but MIT actually has one of the biggest athletic programs of any university. And that includes both NCAA sports and club sports. Now, ballroom dancing, or dance sport is the official term today. It's not a NCAA sport, but it is a competitive sport. So I got started with the MIT team. I actually started taking some social classes, and then I started dating a girl. I got her into ballroom, and she decided she wanted to compete, which apparently meant I decided I wanted to compete.
Mhm.
So we started. I wasn't thrilled at first, but I'm so glad she got me into it. I just had a great time traveling all over the country, sometimes internationally for competitions. I went to the US championships for 7 years straight. And unlike most dancers, I competed in all 4 styles. Most people compete in 5 or 10 dances in 1 or 2 styles, but I figured if I'm flying across the country or driving 6 hours to get to a competition, I want to spend as much time on the floor as possible. So I competed in standard, Latin, smooth, and rhythm. And my favorite dance would be American Foxtrot, which is smooth. And that's what Fred Astaire used to dance. It's just the biggest range of music, the biggest range of styles, and just fun.
Now, same partner for all 7 years?
Different partners. I had 3 serious partners and 1 brief partnership.
Mm.
All right.
So it's the brief partnership. Do you still do it? Or are you out of the ballroom game? Is this a young man's game?
One great thing about ballroom is there are age categories. And in fact, once you're over 35, you're technically senior. And then over 60, I think, is senior too. So you can compete at any age. But when I came to New York, I struggled to find a partner, which surprises people. But in New York, I liken it to theater in LA. No one goes to LA to do community theater. If you're an actor, it's your job. And really the top competitors in New York typically want to turn pro, which I just did not want to do. And so I couldn't find anyone. I'll social dance from time to time. In fact, one of the last things I did before the lockdown hit this year, a friend was in town for a competition and we went out dancing in early March.
Oh, that's the best. When you just go to a random place where people are dancing and just take over the dance
Blow
floor.
them all away.
Yes. Fantastic. I would do that all the time if I could. I would hustle. I mean, I would literally hustle, and the other definition of hustle as well.
Yes.
Across the dance floor.
You know, it's actually a fine line you have to walk. And certainly at some places you don't have sufficient room to do it. At weddings, everyone always says, oh, come on onto the dance floor, show off. And I'm always very cautious. It's the bride's day. I do not want to take away from the bride. So I am not there to show off on the dance floor.
So over all the years, I would imagine with your partners, there was probably a lot of glitter involved from time to time. What's the best way to get rid of glitter from finding it everywhere for years to come?
Not as much glitter as you would think, rhinestones. And rhinestones being expensive, they
Yeah.
are glued on. So the women would have, they called them stoner parties, where they would go and stone their dresses and just sit around and glue rhinestones for hours on end.
The men's costume must have a little extra flair on there.
Not much. My friend Michael Posner was famous for on his Latin pants. He had basically racing stripes. So if you think of on tux pants, you got the stripe down the side. His had some sparkles on it, which he was very well known for that. But in general, men for Latin dancing were pretty straight black, and for standard and smooth, we're usually in a tux or something similar.
I need to do that to my Latin pants. So now then you get into tech, you get into IT and cybersecurity. Is that the next best spot to go? Or is the cufflinks the underlying thing that ties this all together?
You know, they all kind of crisscross over each other.
I'm getting that vibe, yeah.
The cufflinks have been linked to from the ballroom dancing to the cybersecurity and similar types of work. So there might be a thread there. But my career in IT, I came out of MIT with a couple different degrees, including my graduate work, which was in cryptography. And this was back in the 90s. So it's the 90s, it's the dot-com era. And I started doing tech startups, which I've been doing. That's my primary career. I think of myself having multiple parallel careers, but the primary one is building tech startups. And I've helped companies from as small as 3 people in a garage or usually a living room up to companies of 300,000 people who wanted to play startup.
That's
That's
a lot.
that's quite a swing, yeah.
It's a range, and you know there's fun challenges with each, because when you're just a handful of people and you're struggling for money and trying to get people to know about you, it's a challenge. When you're a big company, good news is money's not a problem, but then bureaucracy is a massive problem. When I was consulting with one of my clients, I remember saying we should set up a wiki like Wikipedia. It's just an internal system for saving data. And at my prior startup, I wanted to do this. I just told my junior employee, I said, hey, we need a wiki. An hour later, one was set up. When I tried this at one of the very large companies, they had a 2-month process for getting it set up.
Of course.
Yeah. At that point, I violated corporate policy and just got an external server and did it myself and didn't bother telling them.
Good luck when you run for president. Now, the needs of a small startup and a huge company are so vastly different. People specialize in, I know lawyers and other folks have a very specialization in. I do startups. I do bigger companies. How do you run that gambit and sort of successfully help both sides teams?
I don't think people need to specialize. To your point, a lawyer, the law would be the same for both companies. Now, obviously, your practical strategy, if you have a smaller company that might not have the resources or time to take on an issue the way a big company would, you have to change up your strategy. But if you have a fundamental set of skills and know how to work within those environments, you can suss out what is the strategy we need. Likewise, knowing how to communicate in small companies versus large ones. So I'll give you an example. During, I think, roughly 2010, 2011, I was teaching in a program funded by New York's Economic Development Council. And we were helping people who lost their jobs. And it wasn't simply you're unemployed, wait for the economy to turn around. It was your job's never coming back. We have to get you into a new career. One of the biggest challenges, it wasn't that they couldn't pick up new skills. It's that when you come out of a company that was 50,000 people, as some Manhattan companies are, and you're in a small company, they were used to, let's have the pre-meeting to plan the planning meeting before the meeting to have the meeting to make the decision. And as a startup, you turn to the person next to you and say, what about this? I go, great, done, make it happen. And if you can understand the process differences, because the thinking, how you communicate the problem how you analyze the problem, that's all the same, but it's just understanding the cultural differences in the organizations. And once you can get your head around that, it's a lot easier to go up and down the scale.
And is that something that kind of put you in a position where to write a book, it sort of seems that you can address any size company and anyone who works in any size company, they can learn something from your book?
Absolutely. The subtitle for the book is Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. And it's because after teaching these for 20 years at MIT and in other programs like the one I mentioned, what I found is these are universal skills, skills like leadership, communication, networking, negotiations. How you might implement it is slightly different depending on the size of the organization, right? How you lead 1,000 people is different than how you lead 3 people, but the fundamentals are the same. And one of the things in the book is it's about changing your mentality. It's changing how you see this. And once you make that change, all of a sudden options become much more available. I've seen this time again with the students because, of course, you can do PhDs on leadership, right? I can't teach my students how to be a leader in just a matter of a few weeks or a year. But if I can get them to shift how they think about it, they start to see more opportunities to learn and develop and even practice their own leadership on their own.
So our podcast is neither a career nor successful. What are we doing wrong?
We are.
I think this is a very successful podcast.
you.
I've looked at your
Mark.
episodes and the ratings. And there's, of course, the famous quote, do what you love and you'll love what you do and success will follow.
All that.
I did I didn't even plan to write this book. And now this might sound interesting because chapter 1 is creating a career plan. But one of the things I emphasize
Now we know.
Now you tell me, yeah.
Eisenhower has this great quote. He says, plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And it's not about creating a solid plan and saying, well, now I have to stick to it. And so I talk about how you create a plan, but then you adjust it as you go. So how I wound up here today came from the fact that I noticed a problem when I was interviewing people. I noticed people could answer the technical questions, not just software questions, maybe it's accounting questions or marketing questions. But when I asked them about teamwork or leadership or communication, I get blank stares. And I started to look at why don't people know this? And at the same time, I found out MIT had just gotten a grant from Deshpande. We were looking at starting a program like this. And I just reached out and said, can I be of help? Because I've been looking at this. And I said, help us design it. And they said, help us come teach it. And I was teaching for 20 years. And then I thought I should start writing this down. It became a book. So it wasn't planned. It was kind of random. So when you do what you love, like doing a podcast, it's going to lead you to some great opportunities.
It's leading us somewhere.
The road to nowhere.
You know what they say about the road to good intentions?
Well,
or the road to, anyway.
It leads to 2020.
Paved with good. My
exactly.
choir director in high school used to tell us that all the time during choir practice, which I'm not quite sure why. That the road to hell was paved with good intentions. I got nothing, but I guess. So why do you think these super important, super critical pieces of the puzzle are not taught and haven't been shared throughout the years, even in institutions as incredible as MIT or in companies that are brilliant and wildly successful? Why haven't these things been given before?
And as you noted, it's not just MIT. We've gotten feedback from companies at multiple universities. They've said, these are the skills that are missing. It stems from a couple reasons. The university system, which dates back to roughly the 12th century, was really designed around libraries and concentrated learning. And it's about focusing you on a particular discipline, learning accounting or sociology or whatever that field is. Our primary education, I'll use primary including secondary, right? Elementary school through high school. That is really more a product of roughly the 19th century and 20th century, where it was designed to get you into the workforce. And when we look at these in more detail, It began with, let's get you basic literacy skills, and then let's get you sufficient skills to be, say, a factory worker, or to get you into a basic office job. And even once college became common, because college was not so common prior to roughly mid-century, once it became common, it was, well, learn to focus on a discipline. Again, you're accounting, you're now programming, learn these skills. And most jobs in the middle of the century were, you did a narrow set of work and your manager would tell you what to do. You didn't have to think big. You didn't have to interact with people in other departments. It was, do your job, take what's in the inbox, do it, put it in the outbox, and let the system move it around. So we didn't need people who had a diverse set of skills to interact with lots of people. That's changed in the last 20 to 40 years, depending on who you ask. But unfortunately, our education system tends to trail. And so I think it's only just starting to catch up now.
That's why we have this podcast, because clearly we couldn't pick a path. We want to do everything.
And listening to you talk makes me think I read that Faulkner book in high school for no reason. Now, somebody in these careers in this world that you're working in, it's a lot of tech, obviously. They are not known for being incredibly conversant, or they're not great people persons. Have you, I'm assuming this book helps them with that.
It does. And first, let me say that's the stereotype. And it's a stereotype. There's some truth to it. And I was certainly one of those people. Look at any 80s movie with a nerd, and that was me. I had the tech skills and the lack of social skills.
Did you roll up the sleeves on your sport coat?
I was not cool enough for that.
Okay, fair.
But I would also, I had this discussion with someone recently. I think there's also some stereotypes being perpetuated by lazy writing. When we come up with a hero in our movies, and not the James Bond hero, not the action star, we come up with that intellectual hero on TV, the brilliant doctor or character, the Doogie Howser. Well, that character needs a kryptonite, right? We can't have that character to be perfect.
Right.
And writers are honestly a little lazy because they all go to the same trope of poor social skills. They don't have the trope of, say, alcoholic or some other type of problem. They just go, oh, smart, bad social skills. And I think that perpetuates the stereotype somewhat. And where this is really changing, we are, I think, overall getting better. Certainly to be successful in technology, as with any field now, you can't just be good at the tech. You have to have these people skills, especially as you get more senior. And we're starting to address that, like in the programs I teach at MIT.
What drew you to the field in the first place?
When I was 9, I had been very into UFOs and pyramids and all the kind of fun mysteries of the world. And my cousin, who was a little older than me, told me about how in his physics class, they talked about black holes. And when you get into pyramids, they naturally, on these books I was reading, we get into aliens and then black holes and time travel. And I thought, ooh, physics is related to this. That's what got me into physics. And then the computer science piece. This is perhaps the one time a high school guidance counselor ever is on record of having done something really directed. I was interested in law and I wanted to take the justice elective, but it was not offered that year. The guidance counselor said, pick something else. And I had no idea what to do. Just, I sat there and was lost. And she said, well, why don't you do computer programming? I thought, that sounds boring, but I can change it later. And I couldn't find anything else. And the first day of school, I got into the class and said, wow, this sounds really fun. And so I have to thank my high school guidance counselor. I don't know how much that was directed versus, oh, I know computers are big, so we should shift kids towards that. But she got me on that path.
Awesome.
And you mentioned it briefly at the beginning, catching terrorists. Is that, how do you get into that? Is that because the Spain class you wanted to go to was filled? And you said nothing to do on Tuesday?
That comes from another childhood interest of mine, which was secret codes. Ooh. I love secret codes and making the invisible ink. And when I got to MIT, One area I was interested in is the modern version of secret codes, which is cryptography. It's a branch of mathematics or computer science, depending on which angle you come from. And thankfully, Ann Hunter, who is a wonderful administrator, ran the EECS department of MIT for a number of years. She assigned me as my academic advisor, Ron Rivest, who's a legend in the field of cryptography. And so that got me down the path of cryptography. I did my graduate work in the field. And so with that background, I've done a lot of cybersecurity work. Now, most cybersecurity work, it is creating authentication systems. That's what I've done a lot of the past few years. Or it's how do you lock down certain servers? How do you protect data? But some companies do more intelligence gathering. And for a company I worked for a couple of years ago, we created systems and processes that would go onto the dark web, go into the places where you would find terrorists and cyber criminals, gather this intelligence, and that would be shared with corporations and various government agencies.
And is it like just terrorist.group? How do you find these people?
The terrorists are actually fairly easy. It's less in the news these days, but if you remember at the height of some of the battles with Al Qaeda and ISIS, they were actively going online and recruiting people. And so they had open chat groups. Some were a little more private, but still they wanted people to join and come in. And in fact, our analysts would even go and speak with them. We could have conversations with them, obviously through technology, not standing on the battlefield. But they were happy to talk to anyone because they wanted their message to get out.
And so this was all international, not sort of a domestic terrorism you're focused on?
Most of it was international, but certainly we did track some domestic terrorists as well. A lot of the white supremacist groups and the ones who threaten American citizens on a more regular basis than the ones internationally.
Wow.
That's got to be unreal. Just so when you watch something on TV, right? Because obviously we're always tracking down the terrorists on TV. Well, the rest of us are like, that's not how a reporter would really ask a question. Are you sitting there going, that is not how you track down a cyber terrorist? Or do they get some of it kind of right?
Well, if you're referring to like a Jack Bauer 24 or Homeland, now I haven't watched either of those shows. They do tend to sensationalize it. Most of the job is sitting at your computer, and those of us on the tech side are building the tools to gather it. Those of us on the analyst side, it's going out and getting in, using the tools to get the information. And then, of course, gathering it, analyzing it, and creating reports and summaries about it. And so it looks like most any other office job, except for the 0.1% of the time where police go and kick in a door.
Yeah, you're literally saving the world. It's not a typical office job. It looked like it, but no.
And what made you go into the private sector versus, as one person referred to in an interview I did, one of the 3-letter agencies?
I had spoken with the agencies. They recruited heavily at MIT. In fact, the NSA, I remember a guy came and gave a guest lecture at our class and literally put his business card on everyone's desk before we showed up and said, anyone wants a job, give me a call.
Wow.
Because there's not that many people who had the level of training that you get for a program like that. It was a couple reasons. One, I was always concerned, what if the government started doing things I didn't fully agree with, and how would I feel about that? And I've certainly seen a couple presidents in my lifetime go down that path. I also, at the time, was dating a girl from Singapore. So that was a foreign national. And when you apply to these jobs, you have to list every foreign national you know. So between her and all her friends, I had a laundry list of people I'd have to list. If I want to go overseas, you had to get approval. I just thought, this is a lot of effort. I'm not really sure I go down this path. I've been more on the design side. So, for example, my graduate work was creating a protocol for secure electronic voting over the World Wide Web. For the record, even though, yes, this can work in theory, the cryptography works, it is a horrible idea. We should never be voting online. Paper ballots are the only safe and reliable option. because even if we get the math right, the operating systems, the hardware, all of this is vulnerable, and it is just not worth the risk. Paper ballots work well. They are sufficient. Stick with that.
Because there's always going to be one idiot running Windows 95.
Totally.
Exactly.
Now, yeah.
Someone in my family, I'm sure. My family would take down the whole system.
Do you have tape over the little camera on your computer?
Yes, I do, because I've been on the forums where they sell your video access.
Hmm.
Oh.
That's good to know.
Yeah, that is good to know.
Yeah, I also do not have an Alexa or Echo or any of those. It is they haven't been known to be cracked yet, but that doesn't mean there aren't vulnerabilities. And I suspect there probably are.
So I guess last thing to go into is the cufflinks.
I love that it's all over the place. You're like
It really is.
You are the epitome of the perfect definition of this show.
So the cufflinks, did that start with the dancing?
It's a little bit. At MIT, we're not known for how we dress. MIT is very much a meritocracy. It's the content of your ideas. Doesn't matter what you wear. And that's one of the great things about MIT. For ballroom dancing, how you dress is part of it. And my Latin instructor used to yell at the entire team and say, "You are the worst groom team out there. You need to fix this. You need to dress better, groom better," and yell at us repeatedly. When I got my first management job, I realized I needed to step up how I was dressing. Sneakers and polo shirts might not have been sufficient. So I had a friend, we went out to an outlet mall, and I said, "Okay, pick out some clothing for me." So she picked a whole bunch of things and said, "What do you think?" I said, "Nope, I do not get a vote," because I hate it all, but I was committed to this. So she picked out a bunch of things, bought a whole new wardrobe, and I started dressing in more adult businessy clothing. And then a few years later, I was consulting at NBC. I was helping with a business unit that ultimately got spun out into what's now Hulu. And my girlfriend at the time was on Wall Street. And she kept saying, "You need to dress, step it up. You need to wear cufflink shirts." And I remember I said to her one day, I said, "It's really interesting. The managers," which is like the lowest level non-entry person, they just wore plain button-down shirts. The directors wore French cuffs about 30% of the time. The VPs wore French cuffs 60% of the time. And the GMs 90% of the time. And she said, "Yes, this is what I'm telling you. This is why you need to dress, because of course you always should dress for the job you want to get." So for my birthday, she bought me a couple French cuff shirts and my first pair of cufflinks, which was an MIT cufflink set. And for a couple years, I just had a few basic cufflinks, a knot, a square. Then I discovered there are a whole diverse set of what people would think of as novelty cufflinks, but I think of as much more fun. So I now have over 400. And I have food from pizza, hot dogs, sushis, bagels. I have drinks from Coke and Starbucks and gin and tonics. I have planes, trains, automobiles. I have comic books and Doctor Who, Star Trek, Star Wars. I have holidays, so menorahs and matzah, but also Christmas trees, Santa, jack-o'-lanterns, and just all sorts of cufflinks. So each day, either I'm doing some activity where I'll wear that particular cufflink that relates to the activity. Or if I don't have anything planned, every day is something like National Adopt a Cat Day,
Yes.
National Coal Miners Day. And so I will just look and pick out whatever cufflink resonates with that day.
Are they cataloged?
Dude went to MIT, Heidi. Of course they're cataloged.
I know, you're right.
Well, this is a challenge when you have 400. How do you find one set within 400?
Right.
So I have jewelry boxes that are, I think, either earring or ring boxes. I'm not sure. And I have them organized by categories. So I have food over here, holidays over here, so I can quickly go to whichever set I need to look through.
That's fantastic. Why did you fall in love with them so much?
I'm not quite sure. I think just as I committed to wearing dressier clothing early on, I committed to wearing cufflinks. And then at a certain point, it just felt like the right style for me. And certainly working in tech, I can show up to work in a t-shirt. No one cares. Even as a CTO, who cares? But I like dressing up that way. it's almost become my personal brand. And certainly my coworkers, they always love, what's your cufflink today? Everyone always tries to look, what are you wearing? Because they see it as fun. And I think probably the upside of that, it is my brand now, and that people know this about me, and they know, oh, Mark and his cufflinks. And when people haven't seen me, it's always, oh, what are you wearing today? And I think it's also just fun. Men, most of what we wear, okay, it's pants, it's a shirt, or you're doing blue or white, maybe a little pink. You don't have a big range, but this is something unique and interesting that we can add to our wardrobe.
For more information on Mark or his book, The Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You, you can check out his website, which is at thecareertoolkitbook.com.
You can follow us on all the various socials. Our website is whythepodcast.com and has all sorts of additional stories and videos. It's also where you can sign up for our newsletter. We're also on YouTube if you're into that kind of thing. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, because if you don't, we'll call your mother and tell her that she's completely right. You would look so much prettier if you smiled more.
Why the Podcast is part of Mudhouse Media. Today's show was produced by myself and Heidi Hedquist. Our reluctant executive producers are John Sauvé and Sandy Stone. Our willing executive producers are Rachel Allen and Randy Jeanette. Our graphic designer is Samantha Mustonen. The theme song was performed by the Electrosynth-O-Magnetic Polyphonic Orchestra. This one's for Philippe. Thanks for joining us. Flash, we're coming home.
Nigel, is that you? Are you here, Nigel?